Adam, if I don't get to the question, because there is a lot of material, what I will do is put out some information for you, okay? And make sure you get that information.
Thank you so much. Super
Sure, of
appreciate it.
course. Yeah, not a problem. Yeah, taxes are a thing. In Maryland, are you in Pennsylvania, Adam, or are you in Maryland?
I am in Pennsylvania. Yeah.
You're in PA. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I figured with the question. So it's
Yeah.
good. Great. I've made note of
That's the
it.
thing that gives me the most trouble over everything is just trying to figure out what transfer tax I need to put on a seller's cost estimate or a buyer's cost estimate
Yeah,
because I
what
know it differs from county to county and it also differs from first time home buyer to non first time home buyer. I know some of the basic rules, but I don't always feel 100% confident of the exact amount that I'm referencing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we'll talk about that. But one of the things
Awesome.
quickly, what I would say is lean into your MLS and or your title company because they'll have the service, which will automatically kind of do it for you, and then you don't have to worry about the county. The only thing you would have to worry about is whether you know they're a first-time home buyer or not. But
Okay.
most of our services will do it for us, so that we don't really have to know any of it.
Okay. Awesome.
We cheat.
If you're
And
not treating, you're not trying.
we cheat. Whenever possible, we call it cheating. It's not really cheating, of course, but
Yep.
that's what we call
We
it.
always made a joke in college. If you're not cheating, you're not trying.
It's called borrowing. Let's call it borrowing. Anyway, well, I am giving it just another moment or two, even though we are recording, just to give everybody a chance to jump on who'd like to be here. Again, I am that person who looks at my calendar at 1 for a 1 o'clock, and then I go, where's the link? So I always like to give people just an extra minute or two, especially in the middle of our busy work days, to kind of find their calendars and find their links and then get onto Zoom and all of that good stuff. Feel free to keep your videos on. You can have them off. It's really your call. I like participation in my classes. So if you are near and if you're just listening, that's quite all right. If you'd like to participate, chat is open. I'll be checking that out through the class. I will ask for your reactions on time to time. And if I am also a very fast talker at moments. And so if I say anything that's unclear and or you want me to repeat or slow down, feel free. I take no offense. Please let me know what you need. All right. Well, with that, I say we go ahead and jump in because it is being recorded. So anybody who would like to rewatch the recording and or is not here for the top of the hour can jump in and then catch the very beginning. My name is Jenny McAtee. I am the new broker as of last week, I guess, officially, of the Frederick office, which we know is the first Maryland office for the Titan 4. And I'm very excited to be in business with them. And yeah, thank you, Joanne. I love that. And I'm really excited. My intention is not only to stay with Iron Valley, but to also open up another brokerage with Iron Valley. And so I'm looking forward to that coming as well. If you have any questions, by all means, let me know now or in the future. My email, all my numbers are everywhere. So you can easily find me. You can always call the Frederick office also, and Julie can forward you to my phone. But I'm an open book, so feel free to always call. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any problems, questions, or concerns at any time. I really am here for you. And if I don't know the answer, trust me, I know 1,000 resources where I can go find it, or I'll just call Justin and he'll help me find it. So he's my buddy as well. Today's class is really about getting you familiar with the Maryland contract of sale. And so we're going to actually, though, talk about more than just the contract of sale, because I firmly believe that it starts with understanding contract. And the first thing that I'd like to do with that is figure out who we are. You know that I'm your broker now, and that's great, but I don't know you all as much as I'd like to. So I have two screens. You'll see me kind of looking to one side or another. I'm sharing my screen with you now. If you cannot see it, if you cannot hear me at any time, throw it in the chat or feel free to use the react buttons at the bottom of Zoom and let me know, raise your hand, whatever you need to do. Interrupt me at any time.
Hey Jenny, I have a quick question.
Heather, yes.
With it being like you're the brokerage for the Maryland now, when we're writing these contracts, are we now listing you instead of Justin?
Correct. Yep. If you're
Okay.
doing a Maryland contract or any Maryland contracts, whether it be the contract of sale, a listing agreement, or a buyer broker agreement, by all means, you're now using me and my number, same office information, etc. And I will put that in the chat, and we're going to make sure that that goes out in multiple ways so that you have all of that information.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking it. So let's start with how many of us in the room, and you can use your react button, and especially if you're not on video, are in Maryland. This is where you primarily do your business. Okay, Joanne. Thank you, Joanne. Carlene. Okay, thank you. Carly. Nice to see you here, by the way. Excellent. So the rest of you then are, I'm assuming, in Pennsylvania and your dual licenses coming over. Is that true? Okay, great. So there are some really significant differences between Pennsylvania license and Maryland license. And in fact, or I keep saying license, sorry. Let me rephrase that. Contracts. In fact, the first time that I looked at a property in Pennsylvania, I was rather shocked at your disclosures because I kept going, like, where are they? They're non-existent. And when you look at our contract, it's significantly longer with all of our addendums than, thank you, Danielle, for that, letting us know you're in Hanover, that are different. We have a lot of addendums, but there's really easy. And a lot of people get very confused by the Maryland contract. Once you figure out some tricks and understand what you should be thinking when you're filling out a contract, I think it'll help you a great deal because of those differences. Now, there's another question that I have, and that is how many of you have written a Maryland contract in the last, say, 3 months? How many of you have written a contract, a Maryland contract of sale within the 3 months? Okay, Jen. Okay, Heather. Excellent. Adam, Joanne. Excellent. All right. So we can see maybe half of us have, half of us have not, and that's okay. There's, however, a more important question to ask, and that is how many of you have actually ever, note the word ever, read the Maryland contract of sale from top to bottom? Adam, excellent. This is Stacy, and it's okay to be honest too, Joanne. It's okay. Like, it's amazing to me how many, Kira, great, thank you. How many of us actually have never taken the time to read the contract? But if you do take the time, and I recommend reading it often, not just once and done, because it changes fairly frequently. The contract is actually very clearly written. Yes, it's all legalese, but if you take the time to slow down and read the paragraphs, it actually leads you to the information that you need. So that's hint number one, is make sure that you're reading the contract. And that's what I love to ask. And by the way, I do teach all over the country and am a certified instructor nationally. And so one of the things I love to ask anywhere I'm teaching about contract is who's actually read it. And sometimes my reactions to that are quite hilarious. Okay. I had a guy who taught real estate for 10 years. He's like, I've never read anything. And I was like, oh, I don't know that I'd be proud of that. But let's see if we can help you change that. Okay. Because we have to explain this to our clients. We cannot explain it if we don't know what we're reading and understanding and is right before us. Okay, we can't expect them to know if we don't know. And so that's number one. Make sure you're reading anything that you submit to your clients for signatures. The difference between mediocrity and excellence, in my opinion, is an attention to detail, and especially when it comes to contracts. You're asking someone to sign something that you really are not a part of when it comes to the contract of sale. You're just helping and guiding them. And so it's really important that we are focused on the details of what it is within those documents. Today, what we're going to cover is a little bit of contract review because the teacher in me always feels the need to make sure you know what you need to know, where to find all the documents in Maryland. That also tends to be a source of confusion for many people. And then also the contracts themselves. We will go over state mandated disclosures, the listing agreement, and the buyer agreement. When I say we're going to go over those are going to be very high level, as in really just pointing them out and showing you where to find them. One or two best practices there. The rest of the time together will be spent on the contract of sale. So I would encourage you, as I'm pulling it up, for you also to pull up the contract of sale. You might want to have it in front of you for reference. And what I can do is throw that in the chat. And I'll do that in just a few moments so that you can pull it up and follow along when we get to that point. There are 6 elements. That's right, 6, not 5 elements of every contract. And it starts with legal competent parties. Now, we already know that they need to be 18 and of sound mind and all of that stuff. That's great. But what we need to consider on a day-to-day basis is that we know the legal names or the legal name of the entity that's actually being the transferring party or the grantor grantee within this contract. So you might be dealing with, say, a personal representative, making sure that you know the actual legal names of who's on the deed and how they're going to sign those contracts. This becomes really important for us when it comes to the actual contract and who we're actually working with and who we're expecting payment from. So making sure you have those legal names. You can verify that through the deed and asking questions. Simplest form. Getting verification of that. The second element you need in any contract is there has to be a legal purpose to the contract. What does that mean? You have to verify through tax records or deeds. And again, we're not going to show you in this training how to find those documents, but if you need help with that, please let me know and I'd be happy to take you through that and or do a future training on it. But pulling up a tax record, pulling up a current deed is going to give us those legal names or at least give us a start. I went to list a house for a personal friend, and when I pulled the deed, I did not recognize the name. And I'd known these people for 35 plus years at that time. So I had to, say, like, wait a minute, what's this name? What's the deal? And who's actually selling the house? So I learned a lot in that conversation. Had I not pulled the deed, I would have thought I knew the answer, and I didn't know the answer. The third element is consideration. Consideration is the value that a buyer is willing to pay for that property. We can exchange property for property. It doesn't have to be monetary. So it's not the EMD. The EMD is strictly an earnest money deposit. That is not your consideration. Your consideration is the full amount or value that a buyer is willing to pay within that contract. You have an offer that's presented by an offeror. You will never hear me say buyer or tenant, because that's not what that is. When you're writing a contract, what you're doing is presenting an offer. So your client is the offeror. The one accepting that or the one receiving that offer is the offeree. That offeree has a right to say what? Negotiate, send back different terms, at which point those now have switched holds, right? You now are the offerer, or the seller is now the offerer, and the buyer becomes the offeree of that contract. Now, most of us do it verbally and it goes back and forth pretty quickly, but you got to know who's offering and who's receiving that offer before you can ever have acceptance, because you got to figure out who's making the offer. So be careful of just saying buyer and seller. We tend to get into that habit in practice, but the reality is there's no buyer and seller until we have signatures on a page. And it is those signatures that indicate all parties have agreed to what's in the contract and agree to the terms of that contract. And at that point, we have an executed contract and we are in a state of go, right? Let's go buy a house. Let's go buy a property. In Maryland, as I'm sure it is the same in Pennsylvania, the last element is that it has to be in writing. We call that statute of frauds. It has to be in writing. And if it's not in writing, and we do this often as real estate agents, we're doing a lot of on the phone, especially this time of year where it's very busy. Sure, we'll make that change. That's not a guarantee. Until it is in writing and all parties have signed and or initialed, we don't have a full contract. Okay, so just be careful of those best practices and be aware of those elements. Sometimes we have forgotten those since our early days of getting licensed. In Maryland, as I said, it can be a little confusing as to where do I find all of these documents. Now, if you are part of the dot loop or sky slope or whatever the Titans use, that's fine. Most of the time, you're going to find that those are up to date and they have everything that you need. But I do believe you should know where to go find these documents on your own. If dot loop is down or your password unprotected or whatever it is, you need to know where to go. And the first place that we can always go look is Maryland Association of Realtors. You find that at marylandrealtor.org.
Hey,
When you
Jenny.
go, yes, Heather.
Sorry, I just with that, and I don't know if something's changed or not, but I know like with my previous history with stuff, with us Pennsylvania agents, we're already linked to the PAR site. So we don't get access to the MAR.
Got it. So if you're not a Maryland agent, first of all, you should be able to because your broker is. So what we will verify, and I'll verify that for you because if you're in PA, Justin is your broker. But now that we're tied and we have a Maryland broker, that should switch for you and you should be able to get those documents. If not, certainly we do keep them updated through the Titans and through our internal systems. And so you should always be able to get them there.
I
But
personally
if
had to join MAR
you
in
did
order to get access to them.
to all of them. Okay, well, let me take a look into that. And thank you, Heather, for that comment, and Jen and Adam also for the give. But let me verify that with like what happens with the connection between us, because the challenge is the connection is fairly new. And when I say us, I mean the PA group and us as Maryland through the one entity, right? So let me do some verifying on that and get you some information, okay? Either way, even if you can't get to Maryland Realtors, if you're not in Maryland, if you're in the Pennsylvania group, those of you who are in Maryland are members already of Maryland Realtors and should be able to. And then if you're in Pennsylvania writing in Maryland and you find you need a form that you can't get to, and Adam's not reachable and nobody else is reachable, I should be reachable and you should be able to call either myself or call the office and Julie should be able to pull those documents for you. Because we do have, as you're going to find out here in a few short minutes, quite a few addendums to choose from. And not all of them, though they're listed in the contract, even then there's some that are out there on Maryland Realtors that are not listed in the contract. Okay. So if you're like, I don't know what to do, chances are you need a form, you're going to give me a call and I'll get you what you need. You also should be able to, and so Heather, thank you again for that, because you do have to be a member if you're going directly to that website. The second place that you need to look for documents is at the commission itself. Okay, you find that labor.maryland.gov under licensees and MREC. I just Google DLLR MREC. I used to be able to Google MREC, and now some other company has the fight on that, or at least my Firefox pulls it up. But either way, or Google Maryland Real Estate Commission. When you get to the website, it goes scroll right down to the bottom of that home page, and there are the required documents. I'm going to show that to you in just a few moments. so you see it in live and in color, but still, just so you've heard it. And then Bright. Bright, of course, we all have access to Bright. I would assume we're all members of Bright. There again, the only document you're really pulling off of Bright are two disclosures, either one for the seller and or one for the buyer. But you can get that there as well. And then, of course, Loop, your admin or your broker should be able to get any and all of these documents for you. Okay. So I know for me, when I was a newer agent, that was really confusing because, we had an internal system like Loop and we had all the templates and it seemed incomplete, and it's because it was. So every now and again, you can't get to one. And not knowing where to pull documents can be very frustrating on a Saturday at 10 p.m. when you're trying to write a contract. Let's take a look together at this Maryland state mandated disclosures. Because they are mandated by the state, they are found on the commission website. And that is here. Again, if you come into the commission website and just scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see where it says forms. There's the advertising checklist and an income handbook. But this is really what we want, and that's this area right here, this quick access to the required forms. These are state mandated forms. They're not optional. And so you need to get very familiar with these forms. We're going to go over them here very, very quickly. The first one is understanding whom real estate agents represent. This is a glossary of terms. This is going to tell your clients who different real estate agents are. Again, I'm going to do a much more deeper dive training on those documents and how they apply to the listing agreement and the buyer broker agreement. However, they are mandated, and understanding whom, and I'm going to open it here for you so we can look at it. This is not a contractual form. It's a state mandated disclosure form. Now, I'm not going to take the time to read it or review it today. However, the law says that the first scheduled face-to-face meeting, whether that's Zoom or in person, some electronic version and or in person sitting at a coffee place or in the office, you're supposed to present this to the client, aka the customer, because this person is currently unrepresented. Now, if this is someone and they're like, hey, Jenny, I love you, I'm going to hire you, whatever, technically you do not need this document if they sign your listing agreement or your buyer broker agreement. However, I see zero reason why you would not give this to every person that you meet. And I think when I train you on that, you would see that for yourself. Most importantly, page 2 back here really indicates to the consumer what they can expect from us as licensees. And most importantly, and one of my little tidbits of information is, why wouldn't you want someone to know how they can get your license out of the commission, right? I mean, if I'm telling you how to not only to fire me, but how you can actually get my license and my livelihood taken from me, chances are I'm going to be pretty honest with you and upfront about it. So for me, this is a document I use as a, hey, why wouldn't you hire me opportunity? I'm being as transparent with you as possible. I want you to know who agents are and who your buyer agent is versus a seller agent and who I represent right now sitting in the chair in front of you, right? So we clearly fill this out and get them to sign. Rarely have I ever had anybody not willing to sign this document. They're a little hesitant if they've never met me before, but I have only 1 or 2 times ever had someone say, no, I won't sign it. Not a problem. I say not a problem at all. If you're not willing to sign it now, because note it now means I'm going to present it to you later, by the way. But I'll just write their name in and then I sign and date indicating, hey, I gave them the opportunity to, I asked them to, they opted not to. Okay. So that's all you're doing by signing it. Them signing it is just saying they were presented with the information and given an opportunity to ask questions about it. That's really all it is, an acknowledgement of receipt. That is the understanding whom real estate agents represents form, and a pretty critical one, and one that we often find for some reason is missing totally. I make it a practice everyone gets one. Okay. That's just me. The other form that you can get there off of MREC is the notification of the consent for dual. Sorry, it's the notification. It's really consent for dual. If you're on a team, there is the notification of dual on a team. And so let's take a look at that one together. Now, I love the word consent because, you might like someone, that doesn't mean you can lean over and give them a kiss, right? You need consent for that. The same is true for this. This is a problem that has been in the last couple of years, the commission has really started to crack down on, and that is making the consumer aware of what dual agency is. And dual agency, as a review, is any time that a property is listed by a broker and the buyer's agent is affiliated with that same broker. Only the broker can be a dual agent. We do not have dual agency in Maryland on the licensee level. So only the broker could be, only Iron Valley Real Estate Crossroads can be the dual agent. So again, it's non-contractual. However, with this one, yes, it's information. And yes, we're going to ask for their consent by signing this document. This one is giving the pre-approval for it, right? So we're asking in advance, should it become a thing? Should I take you into a home that is listed by Iron Valley, which may not be a strong possibility now, but as we have more and more brokerages opening, as we are increasing our footprint here in the state, this is going to become more of an issue. Okay. And so what we're saying is, look, it may not be possible, it may not happen, but if it does, do you approve? And the buyer and or the seller then have the option to say yes or not sign it. And essentially they're saying no. If they don't sign this document, we can't walk you into what? A house listed by Iron Valley. So this becomes the issue, specifically Iron Valley Crossroads, of course, let's be clear, or any other brokerage that I happen to be the broker of as well. It's up to the broker. So you're looking for that consistency there. If it's another Iron Valley in Maryland that's non-brokered by myself, you have no issue, but it still doesn't hurt. The consumer doesn't understand all that. So making sure you're getting that pre-approval. If you do walk them into a home and they decide to write an offer on that home listed by an Iron Valley real estate agent, then we're going to come back to this document and we're going to say, okay, let's review what dual agency is. And are you still, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, willing to be part of dual agency? And again, they would sign. Okay. So this is a consent. This is a pre-approval, if you will, from your clients about dual agency, and it is required by the state of Maryland Commission to be done prior to them taking them into any kind of property. Okay. Any questions on that? It looks like Adam has one. So this would be any salesperson to any other salesperson within the same brokerage. 100%. You've got it. Yep. You would not need it if you were taking them into a listing by, say, Coldwell Banker. Not necessary. However, it doesn't hurt to get the pre-approval, especially when we're really busy, right? Those busy times of the year where we're multitasking. And especially, you're out on a Saturday, they get no, I don't like it. It's a 5-minute showing. You thought it was going to be 30 minutes. And then they go, hey, I saw one that came on, across the street. Could we go in? And you look over and you're like, wow, it's an Iron Valley one. Are you going to remember really if they sign consent for dual? So it's just easier if you get it done all in the beginning and keep everybody in compliance.
This doesn't apply if you're showing the listing to like a sign call, correct? Because they're technically unrepresented at that point.
They're Correct. But then, what comes into play is understanding whom. So when you show
Right.
up onto that sign, you're going to make sure before you walk in the front
That's what I
door,
thought.
they know that you are not representing them. You represent the seller at that point. Yeah,
Okay.
100%. You're welcome. Great, great question. Excellent question. Yeah. All right. And then going back to the commission, there are a few other uh, notices or forms. Sorry, I just had a blank moment, obviously, there. And I'm not going to go over these today, just to let you know. One is the property disclosed disclaim form that is supposed to be done by every seller. You'll see that when we get into the contract of sale, that's where it's mentioned. And then the open house disclosure sign. So for all of my newer agents, especially, and or if you're new to selling in Maryland, that's fine as well. This is the sign that the commission requires you to have. They put it right here on the commission website that says, look, it has to be 8.5 by 11. It has to be printed in color. And I highly recommend that you do this. If you haven't shown an open house in 3 to 6 months, print out a new one. The commission is famous for changing this disclosure sign and famous for changing it in the most minute of ways. Sometimes it's just been the size of the font. What the point is that if anybody walks in, and I hate to tell you, I'm one of those people. When I walk into open houses, it's what I look for. This is the disclaimer to the consumer, who we represent and who represents whom at that open house. Okay, so the commission takes that very serious as well. Look for more training on that in the future, but all of that can be found there at the commission website. Any questions about anything I have given so far, or finding anything on the commission website? All right, well, let's continue then. Make sure I'm showing the right part of the screen. Again, this is just the 4 forms that you can find there. And with this disclosed disclaimer statement, really important for listing agreements. Okay, and I will go over that in much detail in a future training. This is the listing agreement. As we know, we can find this on Maryland Realtors. We can also find this on any forms offered from your brokerage office, our office. It's going to take me a minute to get used to saying that, by the way. Sorry about that. And so all that I want you to remember for now about the listing agreement is that the 3 documents on your screen in orange, understanding whom real estate agents represent, the consent for dual agency, or if you're on a team, your dual agency on a team, and that exclusive right to sell agreement are required. They're required. And the 2 can be found, as we just showed you, on the commission website. Okay, on the commission website. You would also, for your listing agreement, want to make sure that you have your disclosure of inclusions and exclusions. Okay. Where do I find that? Well, and by the way, I see an error in my slide, so let me just throw myself under the bus. This should have been the disclosure, the property disclosed disclaim should have been in red, in the orange. This one should be white. Clearly, I did not review clearly enough. But needless to say, the 3 over here, these 3 with the white, are on the commission website. The exclusive right to sell, the inclusions, exclusions, and the Superfund site, the national priorities list, can be found on Maryland Realtors. Well, let me show you Maryland Realtors so you can see where, if you are part of Maryland Realtors, you can find it. And if you cannot find it there, that's okay, because you are going to find it through the brokerage, and or you're going to call me and I'm going to send it to you. This is Maryland Realtors. If you come to the home page, which is what this is, you would go under legal resources, forms, statewide forms. Now, I just love whoever's gotten organized over there, because they have redone the forms so they make more sense, and I'm just in love with this. First of all, they have some quick little links for us on the right-hand side. And so you immediately, if you're looking for the listing agreement, can go to brokerage forms and it pops you right to the section that you need. And of course, we have the exclusive right to sell residential brokerage agreement here. And upon clicking it, it immediately downloads it to your computer. You don't have to do anything special. It's just automatic for you. Fabulous. The same can be found with any of the disclosures, or of course, which is what we're going to talk about, which is the contract of sale. Okay. And so you can do that, excuse me, here, right? And here's the residential contract of sale. I'm going to go ahead and add that now to the chat so that you have a chance to pull it up if you haven't already. You'll know it's the latest and greatest because I just downloaded it. And so in chat right now, you should be able to open that PDF so that in a few moments we can cover it together and you can follow along. Right? If not, download it for yourself and take a look at it after the training if you're on your mobile, on your phone, or that kind of thing. All right. So again, this is the Maryland Realtors and all of the forms. Now, if you're not sure which form you need, what I love is they have categorized them, but all of the names are there. So they've done it by category: contract of sale and addenda, brokerage forms, etc. And then within each category, they're alphabetized. What they used to have is just one long list. And then if you missed it or didn't know the actual name, you really had a hard time finding it. And now I'm like, okay, I'm looking for a disclosure form. Okay, I have a homeowners association. Great. I just have to go to that section. And then it breaks it down into more manageable bite-sized pieces. But more importantly, I know only those documents deal with homeowners associations. So it helps for newer agents, especially, or for those of you who don't write often in Maryland, to find what you need specifically. So again, I know some of you are not members of Maryland Realtors, so this would not be available to you. But if you are, here is an easier, quicker way to find what you need. And again, if you can't find something or you're not sure what the form is, you're going to give us a call and we're going to help you out with that. Going back then to the listing agreement specifically, I want to make sure you know that these are the 6 documents, 6, 3, 7, 7 documents, I can count, 7 documents that you need for every listing agreement without any ifs, thens, or buts about it. You're either pulling these from the commission website, our internal systems, or you can get them on Maryland Realtors. The other location for them is Bright. And there it is, the red form. So if you go to Bright, is there anybody who needs me to go to Bright and show you that? Anybody who would like to see me go to Bright and pull up those documents? Adam, you would? Excellent. Let me do that for you then. Happy to do that. Happy to do that. What I'm not happy about is the 1,000 things I have open on my computer at the moment. But anyway. All right, so you will recognize my homepage might look a little different. My workspace might look a little different than yours, but needless to say, what we need is up here in the top. And what you're going to, I think it's clients. I honestly sometimes have to like remember. It's listings. And if you go to listings and then profile sheets and listing forms, and honestly, that's the confusing part. Because if you're like, well, it's not a listing, why do I have to go to listings? Don't ask me, ask Bray. But that's where it is. It's under listings, profile sheets, and listing forms. And it kicks you over to this page where right here they have the seller and buyer disclosure form. And again, if you click it, it becomes an immediate download. And let me show you what that looks like once it's downloaded. It looks like this. So what they've done is just this was one form. They've now just separated it into two forms. And so you have your seller and landlords, it's the red one. Or for buyers and tenants, it's the blue one. So a lot of us kind of complained it was a little clunky. And so they separated them out, which is very helpful for us. Okay. And so again, for any listing, that's your 3 locations or 4 to find your documents and what is included and needed and going to be required for any listing, right? Any listing. So as a final review, let's look at that for the listing agreement. You're representing the seller. You need your understanding whom, your consent for dual, and your property disclosed disclaimer off of MREC. That's the Maryland Real Estate Commission website. You'll need your right to sell, your inclusions, exclusions, and your Superfund site coming off of the Maryland Realtors, and then your Bright disclosures, which you could find on Bright. Okay. Which leads us then, of course, to the buyer broker agreement. And it's not far different. Of course, we need the two, almost 3. And note it did it the same there too. All right. You need the understanding whom and the consent for dual. And by the way, some code words, you'll hear me say it all the time. I go understanding. And newer agents look at me like understanding what? It's just I'm shortening the form name. Or you'll hear people say the whom document. I've heard that said too. Like people have their own shorts. I hate the UWREA because I still have to stop and think about what does that mean. But you do you. Either way, so long as you know what the form is, I don't care what you call it. It's the understanding form, whom real estate agents represent form, and the consent for dual. Of course, you're going to want to pull your exclusive buyer tenant. I give those 3 documents in tandem. You get one, you get them all. Because my intention is to sign you as a client. I'm not going to give you that out. Why waste the time? We're face to face, we're talking, we're communicating. I'm going to explain all 3 documents and tell you, go ahead and sign my hiring agreement, right? There's be no reason not to. And then of course, the Bright disclosure. Now, one of the reasons that I put Bright a little bit to the side is eventually I'm going to ask them to sign that Bright MLS. For me, I have not made it a practice. It's also a newer form, so it's one I'm struggling to put into my presentations. But the challenge here is what's most critical are these 3 on the left. These are the ones that can pull our licenses, right? The commission can call us in. This is how we can and cannot get paid. The Bright one, I can get that to you the next time I see you. And I just feel like we're giving so many forms up front. We might be watering down what they're hearing and what they're actually retaining in information from us. So why not just make that the second batch? That's kind of how I feel about it, but you do your practice any way that you see fit to do. Okay. And if you have thoughts on that or ways that you prefer to do it, let me know because I'm open to new ways of doing things as well. Okay. Any questions on the buyer broker agreement? Required forms. All right. Well, then, let's get into the state of Maryland. Okay. One of my favorite things to talk about is my lovely state of Maryland. And I have to tell you, I'm doing a lot more in Pennsylvania, and I'm falling a little in love with your state as well if you're north of the border. My number one rule for anything in any class that you take from me, you're going to hear this 1,000 times. You might even see me wearing t-shirts that have this logo on it because it is a slogan that I use all the time. And that is hashtag I am not an attorney. Okay. So I like people to know that right up front. I say it so often. One of my students gave me that hashtag and I've used it ever since. Okay, hashtag I am not an attorney. And we like our clients to know hashtag we're not attorneys. We do understand a lot. We have a lot of experience and We are not there to explain the law to them. So if they have questions, we make sure that we are in our lane, and we also make sure that at any given time, they understand they can consult an attorney on their own. Okay. So make sure that that is very clear. When it comes to the contract of sale, Maryland is a very interesting entity. Okay. We are not the largest state by far. In fact, I don't know where we stand in the rankings, but it's not very far up there in size, as you can see. However, we have some really unique and interesting things that we have to deal with in our state. It may occur to you as you're looking at this graphic on the Zoom that we have a lot of water in this state. So wetlands and waterfront property are something you will probably encounter in your career, even if you're coming out of Pennsylvania across the border to write on real estate. There is a lot of water in the state. And so getting to know that water and understanding that, this is one of the reasons why our contract is a little vague. And there are parts of our contract that I get agents ask me all the time, students ask me, I don't understand. Why would agriculture be a part of that? Especially if they're coming from like Anne Arundel County or the Eastern Shore. Like, why do I need about agriculture? Well, because there are a lot of counties that have more agriculture than other. And in fact, we have agriculture in every single county in this state, okay, which is interesting. People don't think of Maryland as a high agricultural state, yet we have a lot of agriculture. We have a lot of wetlands. And so the contract of sale is generic so that it covers anything from the Atlantic Ocean seaboard all the way through the mountains of Garrett County. So it's important that you first understand that. Once you understand a little bit of that, and that this contract of sale is really covering the entire state, it does help to make that a little easier to take. So let's start and go over this contract of sale. I put it in chat. If you'd like to open it and follow along, I would encourage you to do so. And I am working on currently, just so you know, the notes that I'm giving you, I'm actually putting it on an actual form in a more formal way. And so you can look for that, and I'll try to get that out. We've already talked about reading, making sure you read the contract before you have to fill it out. This is really important to do. Let me share this contract of sale with you. So we're all looking at the same thing. You know already, I'm not an attorney, and most likely neither are you. If you were, you probably would not be taking this contract class from me. And then it's also important to know that in our contract, what they've done is they have numbered these paragraphs. Anytime you see bold anything, whether it's in our listing agreement, our buyer broker agreement, or any other addendum, including this contract, it's really for us, the real estate agent. And when you realize that, so that's another tip. If you see bold, it's usually a reason that what they're saying to you is slow down and read what is there and make sure you understand what you're explaining. Okay, so that's a hint for you. They've also broken it down into sections to try to make this 11 pages a little more palpable. And so you can do it in parts as you need to. All right. What will happen is you're going to get so good at this contract, you're going to be able to do all 11 pages in like 10 minutes. I will tell you, and this contract has changed greatly since when I started in real estate. The first time I had to write an offer, it took me like 3 hours. I was like, what's going on? There is a lot of parts, and there are a lot of parts. So let me see if I can make this as helpful and as simple for you as possible. And we have done a lot, and I say we because I have been a part of that committee, but we've done a lot of work. Maryland Realtors has really taken this contract and put a lot of work into making it more user-friendly, clearer, and more hands-on appropriate for the agent as well as the consumer. Okay. So Paragraph 1. So whenever you hear me say the word paragraph and a number, I'm just referring to the numbered paragraphs here on the left-hand side. Date, obviously, you're going to put in the date that you're writing it. Time is of the essence. This is clear across any contract. We have put it within the contract itself. It used to be just like a side note on the top of the contract. Now it is part of the contract. Failure of any party, seller or buyer, to perform by a prescribed date or within a particular time period defaults the contract. Okay. And so what becomes an issue? The earnest money deposit. So keep that in mind. Any dates that you put here, I would highly recommend that you're making sure it's also on your calendar because you're accountable for it. It's your buyers, your sellers are expecting you to know what those dates are, even though they're the ones signing this contract. Okay? Paragraph 3 and 4 gets right into what I said earlier about legal names or legal entities, making sure that you have the legal names as you want it to be. And I usually make sure that the seller and buyer are as it's going to be on the deed. That for me is a practice I do. If it is, say, a representative of, and the deed is going to be written in some other way, all of that could go right there on one of those two lines, not a problem, right? Even though our title companies will ask us the question, it's making sure we have the answers and that we are right. Okay, so again, the legal names go there, or the legal entity buying or selling the property. The property address, paragraph 5, pretty straightforward. Paragraph 6 is whether we're selling it as fee simple or if it's subject to ground rent. And this is where we get our first kind of true lesson about the Maryland contract of sale. Anytime you can answer the question, if I were to change this and put a question mark at the end, like, is the property being conveyed fee simple? And you could answer yes, great. We're going to put a check mark in the box. If the answer is no, then one would assume it's going as ground rent. So I would ask the question, is this property being conveyed subject to ground rent? And if the answer is yes, then that's where my checkbox is going to go. Cannot be both. That's either fee simple or subject to ground rent. And then if it is ground rent, we got to figure out what that is. And so we would fill in the amount of the ground rent according to either Baltimore City or one of the counties. Okay? Chances are, coming out of Pennsylvania, you may or may not, depending on how far south you go, encounter as much ground rent. If you ever sell within Baltimore City, you're going to encounter a lot of ground rent. Okay? There's a lot of sales in Baltimore City famous for the ground rent. In fact, more so than anywhere else in the country. That is the true statement. Okay. Our purchase price, also known as the consideration of the contract, is there. This is the value that your buyer is willing to pay for the property of interest. And then how they are going to pay, paragraph 8, their initial deposit. Okay. And so that's of course, your earnest money deposit. Paragraph 8C says all deposits will be held in escrow. Here in Maryland, that is most of the time going to be a title company. So it begs the question, if it's held by a title company, what do we need? And if it is a title company, and really one would argue even if it's a broker, there is a form for that. So again, anytime, and you'll note there's some bold sentences here, if the deposit will be held by a Maryland licensed real estate broker, then the parties need a separate written escrow agreement. Well, guess what? That just is a title of another form. So if you can answer the question, is the deposit being held by a title company or a broker? And the answer is yes, because it will be, you need an escrow agreement. Okay? That's all that means. 99.9% of the time, your title nor your broker will hold it in an interest-bearing account. Most of the time, we go non-interest bearing. However, there are moments, and I have had buyers say, I worked with one just a few short months ago where they said, well, this is a very large amount of money in comparison to the sale, and we don't want to give it up because we could be earning interest. And they asked it to be an interest-bearing account, and we're willing to pay a fee to get that established. That was their choice. Okay? So if you're wondering who makes that decision, your buyer does. Okay? That's your buyer. Any questions on the first 8 paragraphs? All right, let's continue and go into paragraph 9. Paragraph 9 is all about what's going to happen if this contract becomes null and void. Somebody pulls out of it, a contingency is not met, and the parties decide to forego the sale. Right? What we need to know is that what do we need to get that to happen? And that's this right here, a release of deposit agreement. No, we have a form for that. So again, if I ask the question, is the deposit being returned or does the deposit need to be returned? And the answer is yes, then I'm going to look for the name of the form for that. Release of deposit agreement. Going on to page 2, we start with the settlement date. We will talk in a moment about the time frame that this contract is good for. But what I will tell you is please consider your settlement date according to your lenders and what they can get done, as well as your buyers. I often will ask the seller also, if I'm on the buy side, is your seller looking for a particular settlement date so that I can try to meet that date? Note that we can go sooner, but you cannot extend the contract. This contract does allow us to go sooner without needing anybody's approval or any other signatures. But we cannot just extend the contract even by a day without everybody's approval. So rather than get yourself into a situation where your client might be out of compliance or out of in breach of contract, just make sure your settlement date matches what's really possible. Okay, in 2020, 21, we saw a lot of craziness here where settlement dates were all over the map. I had some written for 2 or 3 days, and you're like, okay, that's just not going to happen. So on the listing side, I'd call them and say, are you sure about that? I use a calendar, but anyway. All right, we'll talk more about that in a moment. Paragraph 11 are all of 99.9% of anyway, are addendas and disclosures. So anytime you answer kind of yes in this document, or the transaction requires something, here are all of the addendas that you probably are going to need. And in any given general contract, and we're talking just a straight contract between a house and a seller of a house, say a standalone single family home and a buyer, you're going to be looking at 8 to 10 of these. If your contracts aren't 35 to 45 or more pages, you're probably missing a few addenda. Okay, just as a quick and dirty hint. Note we can have other addenda. It gives you this option right here at the bottom, or any other special conditions. Sometimes there is like an exclusion that will pop up or some other condition of sale. Not a problem. We can put that right there. You'll know that if you go on, or note that if you go on Maryland Realtors, now I'm not sure about us as an entity, but certainly Maryland Realtors does not have a blank addendum. And this is really kind of, it'll show up for a few years and then they take it away from us. And then when enough of us complain and they kind of bring it back. The reason that they don't allow a blank addendum or really want you to use a blank addendum is because we're not attorneys. And what we see a lot of agents doing is writing these blank addendums as if they are attorneys, and you're not. So you'll note that is not one of them. If you have any questions or any special conditions that need consideration, you have a broker, feel free to call anytime. Paragraph 12, we're going to sign everything electronically. Paragraph 13 is this 11 pages as well as all these addendas. or the entire agreement. Paragraph 14 talks about those computation of days. This is a 365-day contract, and it's a 24-hour clock. In other words, we consider calendar days. This includes Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, all religious holidays, and it starts at 12 midnight through 11:59:59. You essentially have 1 second off between day one and day two. And so that matters with contingencies. If you say something is going to be done, you really do have till midnight to get something to the other party. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Not all contracts are that way. If you ever come down into the DC market, their contract ends at 6 p.m. So you've got to know that. And make sure your buyer knows that. Lenders, however, do not work on Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, federal, state, and religious holidays. So it's important that our buyers understand and that we're computing the days accordingly of what we can achieve. Paragraph 15 goes more into the seller's responsibility. Paragraph 16 talks about if there are leases in existence. And note, we cannot take on anything new. If you are selling an investment property, what would happen is that you would have to have a tenant occupied addendum if there are existing leases, but a seller cannot sign leases that are going to extend past, not once under contract. They cannot sign leases that are going to extend past the term of the contract and selling the property. Okay, that's one I've caught a couple of times happening. 17 talks about assigning this contract and who's responsible if it is assigned. 18 then goes on to talk about the paragraph headings, and I've already mentioned that for you. Are there any questions on page 2 or through section 18 of the contract? All right, let's continue on then and talk about the financing. Noted section 2, we're going to now talk about the financing of this. Now, this is where we really get into the yes and no questions. So it's simple. If the title heading exists, then we probably have a form to go with that. Is there financing? If the answer is yes, we have a form for that. And note, they give you those forms here. You're not going to find the financing forms on page 2. You put all the financing forms that you need under paragraph 19 on page 3. Okay. Some people do put other and put cash. That's fine. I've seen that done. Not a problem. Really, it's only if we're getting financing. Cash would not necessarily be financing. So you do you. Either way is fine by me. Okay. Either way works. Paragraph 20 talks about, hey, by when is that buyer going to apply for financing? So most of us with experience, we try to get our clients, our buyers in particular, with lenders so that those lenders can pre-approve our buyers, especially now where seller's market's been so strong. That became a really important thing. I personally do not like to see zero in any contract. Okay, you can just say within 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, so long as they have applied. This is not pre-approval. This is just an application for financing goes there. And then by when will they actually obtain that financing? They'll get that commitment. Okay, and that goes here. Now, what I would caution you, if you really want a strong contract and one that's not technically an error, you would not just put 1 in 30. I see that often. That's a little suspect to me, especially if up here in paragraph 10, you've told me that you can close, get your buyer to close in, say, 14 days. Well, if you can get them to close in 14 days, then I don't want to see 30 here. That's in contradiction of what you told me when we're going to settle. Okay. So just give that some consideration when you're writing up the offer. Okay? Paragraph 20 is all about the financing. And then we talk more about the buyer's responsibility. Paragraph 22 talks more about the settlement. Okay. And the lease of any other real estate. Note if there are, those leases are an addendum. So we don't have necessarily, here is the paragraph that, or the sentence that talks about leases of any other real estate. But if there are leases that are a contingent on the sale, we would add them and to the addendum. Okay, they'll be part of this contract. Paragraph 3 is any alternate financing. Perhaps there has to be a gift, or there's going to be multiple avenues for pulling in money to finance the purchase. This talks all about that. Any questions on the financing?
I have a question, Jenny.
Yes, Danielle?
For the PAR forms for Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
there if a date is not written in, it's automatically assumed whatever's already on the contract, like 10 days. Like the buyer will apply for their mortgage within 10 days. Is there any type of date stipulation in Maryland?
Not for that, no. Each one is given.
Okay.
Which is why I say you're on paragraph 20. You want to make sure that whatever you put in here, there is no assumption here. You have to tell the seller or the offeree, as it were, when you are going to obtain that commitment. And so if I'm connecting the dots, paragraph 10 then has to be within that time that you can get that commitment. And so one of the things, and I did notice that, thank you for bringing it up, Danielle, because I noticed that in the Maryland, in the Pennsylvania contract, that there are a lot of assumptions, but we don't make those assumptions in Maryland. In Maryland, we really do have to define them.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, that is a big difference, and I'm glad you raised it. Joanne, you may have heard me say that Iron Valley will not hold an EMD. I don't know that I actually said that. Maybe I did, but I really didn't mean to. My practice is to send it to title. I will verify, but last I heard, we do take EMD. So I will let you know if that is different. But for now, assume that Iron Valley does, as a brokerage, accept EMD.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I will get that clarified as well.
And it is opposite of PA. So PA, the listing agent holds it, and Maryland, the buyer's broker would hold it,
That's
just in
correct.
case somebody's not aware.
That's correct, Heather. Thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. And or their title company, right? For sure. Yeah. Or attorney if they're using an attorney. But most of us down here do use title companies. Okay, moving on to section 3 at the bottom here of page 3, paragraph 24. Inclusions and exclusions. We have, if you, this disclosure of inclusions and exclusions and or exclusions. It continues on to say leased items and utilities. If you remember back to when we were talking about the listing agreement and required documents, that is one of those required documents. So again, that's going to be part of the disclosures. We're going to put it in bright so that a buyer already knows what the seller is intending to include or not in the sale. Okay? So that's inclusions and exclusions. And then the same with the condition of the property. We're going to get into more of the what I call the D&D form, or the disclosed disclaim form. This is the condition of the property based on the date of contract acceptance. It is not based on when the buyer saw the property, which is why it's really important that you show a property on a Saturday afternoon. And if your buyer says, yes, I want to write a contract, you get that contract written and signed by your buyer as soon as possible, because anything can happen. I have had buyers look at a property on a Saturday, want to go take a second look, and between Saturday and the Tuesday, the seller has made some change. Now, not maybe structural change, but either the furniture moved, and it was something that I had one where the buyer was like, I was sure that that was a built-in bookcase, and I'm not interested in this living room now. I mean, I was like, okay, whatever, but it mattered to the buyer. That was important to them. And the fact that they had packed up the books and moved the bookcase into the garage really upset the buyer, and they decided that wasn't the house that they wanted, and we did not write on it. So it's really important that we understand that this is upon the acceptance of the contract that it remain the same. And paragraph 26 then goes on to say, hey, as a buyer, are you going to get inspections or not? Okay. And so if so, there's an inspection addenda attached. Okay. This is a contingency on the contract. They can decline inspections. If you decline inspections, the seller is not required to let you in to do them, even for informational purposes. Okay, because it is opening up the seller to possible further negotiations. So just keep that in mind. A lot of people will use this, and it does make a stronger, easier contract when you're up in multiple offers. I get that. However, we should be saying to our buyers, hey, we encourage you to get a home inspection and not be too willy-nilly with the inspection contingency. We see that a lot lately, at least for me, especially in the last 3 or 4 years. Paragraph 27 talks about if there's a homeowners association or a condo, if they're a condominium, if there is, again, is there a homeowners association? If the answer is yes, guess what? We have a form for that. Is it part of a condominium association? Yes, we have a form for that. So, and there are 2 different forms. And so just so you know, again, if you look at the heading and you can answer yes to any question and make it a question and answer yes, chances are there's a form that goes with it, right? That's your quick and dirty lesson there. All right. The regarding disclosure of deferred water and sewer assessments, simple answer here is this is all about a deferred water and sewer assessment fees and when they are, especially with new builds. We have so many new builds going up. This has become an issue. So again, if the seller doesn't know, then their job is to verify. Okay. Chances are they know. New developments I have found aren't often, especially first home buyers who've bought in a new development and that is their first home, they may not be fully aware. Even if they're selling it 5 years later, sometimes they're not aware because they never had anything else. Okay, so just be thoughtful of that. And if there is, we have a form that goes with that. Paragraph 29 is private or domestic water. And again, we do have this paragraph is fairly new for us. It's in this newer version that came out in 2024 of the contract. And this is very clear that as a condition of the sale, the buyer must ensure that water quality testing is done. That is up to the buyer. They can waive their right to test. Otherwise, this paragraph says that it is their job. The buyer will conduct a water quality test. Okay, so I have had agents go, no, they don't have to. And I go, yeah, they do, or they have to waive their right. Okay. And then that water quality test is then given to both the buyer and the seller. They both have to review the results of the water quality test. So it is one of those inspections, if you will, that is definitely shared with buyer and seller. Any questions on any of that? All right, let's move on to agriculturally assessed. Again, very simple. Here, the buyer is responsible for any agricultural tax that comes due. If it is not already in the transfer and the transfer of that agricultural property, if it is going to be negotiated any other way, we have a line for that. Okay. So if the buyer does not intend to use the property for agricultural purposes, then they will be charged a tax and it could be substantial. Note, we're not going to tell them how much. And Adam, this might get to you a little bit to you in your tax question from earlier, but we will not tell you what the tax is because we don't know what the tax is. Okay, that comes from the state, and that's if the state determines that you are not being taxed as an agricultural, and then you're not using it for agricultural purposes, that tax bill is coming later. So we like the buyer to know that right up front. If they want to negotiate the transfer of that agricultural tax in any other way, we have to identify that here on this blank line. Okay. Paragraph 31 talks all about conservation easements. The only thing you need to know is if there is a conservation easement, we have a form for that called conservation easement addendum. Same with forest conservation. If it's forest and part of a conservation program, we have a form for that. Okay. And some more information that goes with it. Again, any kind of transfer and the taxes with that transfer, we have to determine who is paying that tax in this contract. And that would go here on this line. Let's talk more about these general disclosures. This is that single family residential real property disclosure notice. It's part of the disclosed disclaim statement. That is a requirement of every listing. It was listed there in the documents, and you can find it on the Maryland Real Estate Commission website. We will do a much deeper dive training for that in the future, so stay tuned for that. We've already discussed ground rent, and if there is ground rent, we have an addendum for that. We all know anywhere that the Fed takes lead-based paint very seriously. So anything built prior to the magic year of 1978 requires a federal form. Right? And that form is the lead-based paint or lead-based hazard form. We have a form for that. Lead-based paint built before 1978, we got a form for that. Paragraph B of lead-based paint is just reminding both buyer and seller about renovation, repair, and painting of the property. This, by the way, is all covered in our listing and our buyer agreements, specifically the listing agreement, almost word for word. So your sellers will have already seen this information. This is almost a review for them in particular. Maryland also takes lead-based paint very seriously, and so we have our own form for lead-based paint, and that is the Maryland lead-based paint disclosure form. So pre-1978, you would have two different forms. Any questions on lead-based paint? Disclosures of. Let's talk about paragraph 37 on page 6 about the limited warranty. What's really important in this whole paragraph is that the buyer should request each of us to provide them with a brochure that describes the warranty if there is a home warranty being offered or purchased through us directly, that we supply them with a brochure that describes that plan and the extent of the coverage, because home warranties do not cover structural defects or any pre-existing defects. Okay. So just be aware of that. Most of the time, our home warranty companies help us out and give us what we need, but just to be aware of that. More and more information to share. And very similarly to property insurance, there is a form called Property Insurance Basics, what you should know. You can find it here on Maryland Realtors. You can also Google it and it pops right up. And so we should be encouraging them not only to look for property insurance, but to understand what it is that they're doing. And we should be giving them this information. I have missed that myself. So if that's news to you, don't be surprised. I've also missed that sometimes. Again, homeowners insurance companies help us out a lot. And they make sure they have what they need to double back, but that also per this contract should come from us. Flood, if it is up to the buyer, caveat emptor, to go and look up flood. Are they in the flood zone? And if so, Maryland does issue the rates on the Maryland Flood Maps or mdfloodmaps.net website. so they can go look first to see if the property is listed, and then if so, what their flood rate might be according to the state. State is very good about keeping that up to date. Now, I'm not sure if Pennsylvania has a guarantee fund or not. I would imagine they do. Most states do have something similar to the guarantee fund. In Maryland, if you feel that a real estate agent has harmed you or you have lost money based on being represented by an agent, and you file a claim and the commission sides with you, the consumer, they can be reimbursed up to $50,000 for any claim. Okay, so that's important to point out. And by the way, if you read that understanding whom document and you presented it to them, they already know that information. So this would be a repeat.
Yeah, Pennsylvania does have the recovery fund, Jenny. Yes.
They do. Do you know how much it is, Danielle?
I knew you were going to ask me that. And I don't know. I
Oh
mean, I
my
do
God.
know,
Pretty
but not right.
confident it's up to 100,000.
Is it? Wow, that's a lot
Yeah.
more than us. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. But good to know. I mean, most states do have some kind of reimbursement fund or, fund for under occupations and professions. Thank you for sharing that. Now, Adam, you asked a lot about taxes, and we're going to run out of time here. So I'm going to get you some more information. But we have what we call jurisdictional documentation, okay? And that's per county. This contract covers the entire state. Your jurisdictional covers your county and or the city, like Baltimore City has its own jurisdictional. I mentioned earlier about the importance of wet lands and coastal bays and waterways. 41 and 42 cover all of that. What you need to know is that in most of you coming from PA, this is not going to apply because if you are in Allegheny, Carroll, Frederick, Garrett, Howard, Montgomery, or Washington counties, you're not in a critical area, okay? But anybody else, anywhere else in the state of Maryland, your jurisdictional documents will help you through these two paragraphs. Okay, so just know that's what you're going to look for. Where do you find those? You're going to call your broker. If they're not if you're selling in a county other than Frederick or Howard, just give us a call. Really, if you're like all of a sudden you find yourself in Baltimore City, not a problem. Just give us a call. We're going to get you what you need. Okay, either I or Julie or even one of the partners. 43, we do not discuss criminal activity. We leave that up to the buyer to determine. We give them the websites that they can use to discover that. Okay. We do have a lot of military installations in the state. Again, this is held by jurisdictional. So when you pull that county document, it's going to go into that. Okay. Because I don't know what they all are, by the way. All I know is if it's Allegheny, Carroll, Frederick, Garrett, Howard, Montgomery, or Washington, they don't have military installations. So I don't have to worry about it. But any other county does, and it goes to those county jurisdictional documents, which, by the way, can also be found on MarylandRealtors.com if they don't have them in ours through Iron Valley. Paragraphs 45 through 47 are all kind of legalese. Now, I still would love for you to read these. These actually protect us as licensees. Okay. They're basically, in very short, say that we're only real estate agents, right? That we're not experts in any of these things. And so 45, specifically A and B, go really into that. And these are protections for us, believe it or not. Paragraph C is that the buyer and seller are fully responsible for their own vendors. All of the bills associated with them, that's their own call. And then D talks about the foreclosure. Okay. Now, somebody, and I've already forgotten whom, and I apologize, asked about assumed times and days. This really is one of the only ones. There might be a few other minor ones listed here or there. This is the only one that says, hey, the seller does have the right to rescind the contract within 5 days after contract acceptance. If, and that's a big one, if it's the home goes into foreclosure in that time. Okay, so if in between accepting and signing this contract, And they have up to 5 days. If the home goes into foreclosure in those 5 days, the seller gets to get out of the contract. So most of the time, though, we know that going in as listing agents, we're not going to take that chance. We talk about the homestead property tax credit. I do not believe that is just a Maryland thing. I'm sure that's a Pennsylvania opportunity as well. Do you have that in Pennsylvania? Would anybody like to share? Let me know if you do or not. If you
Yes, we
know.
do.
You do. Okay, excellent. I figured. I think it's a federal opportunity. And then property tax in Maryland can be appealed. Okay. Now, I know we're going just a few minutes over, so if you'd like to stay on, I'm going to continue, even though the video is going to go a little long. If you'd like to stay with me, I would encourage you. We only need about 5 to maybe 10 more minutes. But most of the meat of the contract has been done. I do just want to take the time to finish a few other details. Going into section 6, page 7, and then into 8 talks about the deed and title. Note that in Maryland, you do have, if there are restrictive covenants, the buyer is accepting those restrictive covenants. Okay, so restrictive covenants could be good things, zoning laws, etc., and they can also be maybe negative things to the individual. I won't go into this time and give you some examples of that. But if you think about homeowners association and all their bylaws, that's part of what's here. So anything attached to that deed and that shows up with deed and title, that buyer is saying that they are accepting. They're also saying in paragraph 49 that they're accepting the cost of the search for title. So whether that be an attorney or a title company, all of those fees are on them. This also is saying that the seller is going to give good title and merchantable, sellable, essentially, title. Okay. And that if not, they're going to cure any defects on the title at their own cost. This becomes a really important paragraph. It's one that nobody likes to read, and I would encourage you to slow down and read it. It might be one of the most important paragraphs that you read in this entire contract. Okay? Paragraph 50 talks about any adjustments, and a new change in Maryland is that any heating or cooking fuels that remain in supply tanks are the property of the buyer. It used to be that we would negotiate who was taking it or who was getting paid for it, and it became a real thing. So the contract, the Maryland Realtors legal department decided no more based on feedback from agents. We're just going to say anything left goes to the buyer. Okay. Settlement costs are up to each individual to pay. It also goes into veterans. It is worth noting and very important. We do have quite a few veterans, a lot of military presence here in the state of Maryland. Military status is in a protected class in the state of Maryland. You might have remembered that from your reciprocal license, maybe not. So it's worth mentioning. And so the seller does not have to attend a settlement, because often a lot of our sellers aren't around, especially in the center part of the state. Often they're off, like right now, you get a lot on deployment, that kind of thing. Okay. It also talks about VA financing and what's prohibited from the seller to charge. Note, we cannot charge broker flat fees. Okay, so that's an important one. Buyer broker fees cannot be sold. Does not mean we can't charge commission. You can charge commission, but you cannot charge the flat fee. So just keep that in mind as well. The transfer charges, and Adam, you've sat through this whole time, so I can finally get to you with your tax question. What's important to know about transfer charges is that we can negotiate who's going to, in paragraph 52A, who's going to cover the transfer taxes, whether we're going to split them equally or not. Okay? It is assumed that it will be divided equally. If not, and it's a great source of negotiation, is here, the buyer's going to take them all, or we're asking the seller to take them all. Okay? 52A. 52B gets into that first-time Maryland home buyer tax. In Maryland, we give our first-time Maryland home buyers a one-time state tax transfer tax, let me be clear, state transfer tax reduction, one time and one time only. Assuming that we're equally dividing 50% to seller, 50% to buyer, if they are a first-time home buyer, the first-time buyer only has to pay a quarter of the tax. However, the seller is picking up that additional quarter percent. So that 25%, that quarter, is being transferred over, and the seller is taking 3/4 of the transfer tax instead of just half of the transfer tax. That is sometimes has not been pointed out to our sellers. You will note this entire paragraph has been put in bold. So what we have to do, sellers sometimes aren't made aware of it, and that's become a source of contention, as you can imagine. So what we need to do is explain this buyer is a first-time Maryland home buyer. Therefore, Mr. Seller, you will be paying 3/4 of the transfer tax. Well, entirely by the seller. Any questions with that? The state does not cover any of the transfer tax for your first home buyer. Also in Maryland, if you've ever, and let me just say this and then I'll get to the question, Heather. Also in Maryland, if you've ever been a homeowner, you no longer will be a first home buyer. Okay. And I think that's slightly different than some of the programs in Pennsylvania. In Maryland, once your name is on a deed, that's it. That was your one and only time. Heather, did you have a question?
I had a question in regards to, because even B says that it's going to be divided equally, even if they are the first time home buyer. But you're saying that
that's the local transfer taxes. That's
okay.
recordation taxes and transfer taxes. This is the state transfer tax.
Okay.
So you have a state transfer tax, you have a recordation. We're a high tax state. You have a state transfer tax, you have a recordation tax, and then your local transfer taxes, which may or may not exist. So to Adam's question earlier, he said, I don't know about the local and how do I know? Every county, every municipality is different. Some counties don't have a transfer tax. Some do. Montgomery County has a local transfer tax. Other counties do not. So the state transfer tax is what's not equally divided. However, the recordation taxes and any local transfer taxes are considered to be divided equally unless we state so. Does that help?
No, just because I guess I'm just a little confused because they both say that they're split evenly. So like my question would be if I have a first time home buyer that's quote unquote wanting to pay their own taxes, then in this line particularly here, I would have to like not pay their own, but just do everything split evenly. I would have to put them in there as well.
Well, no, if they want to pay, like they don't want the seller to pick up their 0.25% of the transfer taxes for the state. Is that what you're saying? The buyer
Yeah,
wants to
like
pay their own? Yeah. Here's what you do. Let me jump forward and tell you the answer. See this checkbox?
Yeah.
If that's the case, you would not check that they're a first home buyer. And then you would
Even if they are.
That's correct. If they want to pay all their own taxes and they do not want that seller to pick up that extra charge, then you are going to leave this box blank.
Okay,
This
well,
is
I've been
the
doing that
box.
wrong then.
Yeah. And you're not the only one. Trust me, you are not the only one, right? Because this is the problem. Then we get these wackadoodle statements up on this line that you go, well, what does that mean? And title goes, I don't know what to do. So they end up calling you anyway. Yeah. Now, when your title company calls your buyer and says, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, are you a first-time Maryland home buyer? And they say yes, and they verify that contract and they don't see a checkbox, you're going to get a call. So what I would suggest, if it's Heather, if this is the case that your buyer does not want the seller to pick up any extra tax, then you call that title company and be very clear. Yes, they are a first home buyer. And yes, they want everything divided equally. So do not give them the first time home buyer credit.
a few more follow-up questions in relating to transfer charges.
Sure.
So does the first-time home buyer stipulation qualify for only having owned a home in Maryland or any home anywhere in the United States?
Only in Maryland.
Okay, so they don't technically have to be a first-time home buyer. They have to be a first-time Maryland home buyer.
Maryland home buyer, 100%. Yes. They
So
have to
somebody
be.
that's owned a home for 25 years in PA and they move to Maryland for the first time, they can be a first-time Maryland home buyer. Okay,
That's correct. Yep,
awesome.
absolutely. We only care about the state.
Okay, great.
We don't care about anything else.
The local transfer tax is the thing that just really floors me. I find it incredibly hard to find this information on
Yeah.
each locality. Is there anywhere that exists that has some sort of a cheat sheet?
I mean,
Like
no,
where do
not.
I go? Like let's say I'm doing this, it's Saturday at 10 p.m. and I'm writing a cost estimate for a purchase or for my listing side, and
Mhm.
I don't know prior to this. Let's go buyer side because that's more applicable, because listing side I could potentially have time before this to figure it out. But on the buy side, they've decided that they now want to buy in Baltimore County,
Mhm.
and I don't know in that local jurisdiction if there's any extra transfer tax. Like, what do I do? Because let's say I can't call you or any of the brokers, nobody picks up at 10 p.m. on a Saturday, but I got to get this offer in the next hour.
Mhm. Well, this is where, and I'm going to do some homework for you on that, Adam, to see if there's a cheat sheet or someplace I'm not familiar of, and I'll get back to you if there is. But
Mhm.
one of the things that I would recommend is that you also, as I said, call your title company. Do you have, if you have a regular title company down here? If not, let me know and I can put you in touch. Titan Title would be a good place to start with that as well, and say, hey, what would I do? Most of them are published though, so you would have to go to the county and then dig. I wouldn't do that. I would allow the any kind of seller net sheet on Bright. That is all calculated for you. So I wouldn't do it. That way it's not, you're not trying to figure out tax. I would let the system do it for you.
But the
And you,
system doesn't add in the locality taxes.
well, it should. I mean, I've never had an issue with that. So, and I've sold
It
in
does?
9 counties in Maryland. Yeah, I've never had a problem with that. And I've almost been to the penny on my nut sheets. So,
Hmm. So
I
it
had
knows
it.
the difference of every locality?
yeah, it has it by county. Yeah, the county
'Cause-
data is there and it is published. So that's all the time. I mean, and my do my net sheets through my title company, but
Mm.
even when I've done them with Bright. But I'm going to
Yeah,
look for
because I
you.
do all of my net sheets for buyer side on Bright.
Yeah, let me see if I can get you some more information on that. But
Okay.
yeah.
And
I had
the
an
second
issue with
one,
that too. I'm sorry.
Who is that?
This is
Joanne, you have an
Joanne.
issue? Okay.
I did have an issue with the Anne Arundel County had a special tax. I sold my niece's house last year, and I was not. I had done mine through Bright. Also, they were the sellers, but there was an extra tax for them for some reason.
I'm going to look into it and see. And I'll also talk to Titan Title and see what they have as well. Again, maybe there's one I'm not familiar with, but I've sold in Anne Arundel County. And again, it could be that you were in a special, like Severna Park has a special one. So maybe that's possible.
That
Um,
could be, yes.
yeah, yeah. But let me take a look and I will get you both that information. I'll get it out to everyone. Okay.
Thanks.
awesome, thank
Just,
you. And then
you're what? Yeah.
the recordation tax,
Yes. What about the recordation tax?
is that a standard fee everywhere in the state? Does that vary by county?
That is that's a very good one. I think that that's a county one, and I should know the answer to that, and I don't off the top of my head, but I'll double check on that too.
Okay.
But I think that's county jurisdictional, and I say that because you're recording it at the courthouse, and so it's according to the fees of that courthouse.
Yeah.
We
And this
record
is
at
where I
the
tend to fall apart in Maryland in general. I'm fine with anything statewide. It's
yeah,
when we get into county specific. So county specific disclosures, county specific addenda, county
yeah.
specific stipulations, county specific taxes. All of these county specific things is just, we don't have that in Pennsylvania. It's all
Right.
standard across the board.
It's all standard and ours are not. And that's where those jurisdictional documents come in. And so the other thing that I'm not 100% sure of because of only being here a couple of days within Iron Valley is what we have access to and what we don't. And I will tell you that's expanding because you all have only had Frederick and I'm bringing into play Howard, Anne Arundel, Greater Capital, and Greater Baltimore. So what you will find is moving forward within the next couple of, we hope a week. We're really, just to be completely transparent, what we're waiting for is the commission to issue my license. I'm licensed, I'm approved, and I'm waiting for my paper. You know how that goes. Everybody else has theirs. We're still waiting for mine. As soon as that happens, we'll be expanding our trade associations so that all of those jurisdictional will become available to you. Right now, they've only had Frederick. And that's part of your problem. It sounds like you've been trying to sell in Baltimore. Joanne's tried Anne Arundel, and it's like, well, they're not a member of those trade associations. Maryland Realtors does now have them. I noticed that just in the last couple of weeks, but I wouldn't trust that that's complete. They still want you to belong to the trade association, which means your broker has to be, meaning us, me. And so that's coming. Okay. So we're kind of working on that, if you will. But in the meantime, I will get you a lot of information on the tax on all
Okay.
levels. Okay, I promise it's coming.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Super appreciate
No,
it.
yeah, 100%. Just a few other really quick things before we end. If you get a non-resident seller or a foreign investor, these paragraphs 53, 54, call your broker. There are a lot of new rules and laws, and your buyers and your sellers can be held account, especially the foreign investment can be held accountable for a lot of money. Okay, so please, if you get something that is a non-resident seller, 53 or 54, call your broker on those. The rest is pretty straightforward. Title insurance is the same. Broker's fees, liability, we all have that. Default and mediation is pretty standard across the board, and attorney's fees I call it legalese. Again, you're going to want to read it, but there's not a lot there that is different from any other contract or that is not straightforward. The only other thing I'm going to say, again, if you have a first-time Maryland home buyer, make sure that you're checking the box on the bottom of 10. Make sure that you put in that date of contract acceptance. This is when all parties have signed and initialed. And then finally, paragraph or the final page, which is 11. This is really, really important. If you go back up to the attorney fees and that paragraph, it actually mentions here that the brokers identified on page 11. So because it's part of the contract, and I see this, I call them lazy agents. I'm sorry, because that's why I think in my mind when I see it, they'll only put the buyer's name or the seller's name, and then often will leave this blank. Or they'll just put in the broker name or the brokerage company name. Please fill these out as succinctly as you can. We have to have it. It is part of the contract. The other thing is this is a one page that you could give to your buyer and seller so they have each other's future mailing address, just as a hint as well, especially around the holidays when people are getting Amazon deliveries. So just keep in mind that this is part of the contract and we would expect it to be complete as possible. Sometimes you can't find all the information and that's okay, but as complete as you can. Unless there are any other questions. That's a lot of information, and I really appreciate those of you who stood in there with me and waited till the bitter end. Unless you have any other questions, I'm going to at least stop the recording, and then I can stay around if there's anything in particular.
Can I just ask one last quick thing?
Sure.
That date of acceptance there at the backside.
Yes.
I was always informed that that gets filled out like by the seller when they sign everything because that's not a date that we put in like that we're wanting acceptance by, correct?
Correct. That has to be done with whoever signs the contract
Last.
last. That's correct.
Okay.
They're the ones who would put in that date. And it's assuming that there are no other initials. I had one recently where there was an issue, and I can't remember what it was now, some minor thing that was a final negotiation. And they said, oh, we'll send it over. And it was actually the buyer. We actually were the ones to put that date of acceptance in. So again, that goes back to offeror and offeree. It's who's the last one to say yes to all the terms and then get those initials done.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Heather. Great, great questions, everybody. Thank you for your participation. By all means, I'm going to put my information in the chat. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate. Or if you ever want to stop by and say hi, I'm Frederick, I'd love to meet you in person. Okay. Thank you for being here today.